Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be continuing on with my exploration of the work of Alejandro Jodorowsky. I'll be looking at the second of the Jodorowsky libraries, and this will be split into two videos, one for Son of the Gun and one for Pietrolino. So in this one we'll be doing Son of the Gun, which is drawn by the fantastic George Bess. You can see right out the gate, the kind of like fluid realism of George Bess's art. When he gets very close to a figure, it's pretty obvious that he's like photo referencing and using a model. The further away he gets, the more it seems like he's going to just make up the figure. But he's able to integrate those two things really well and make a really engaging, highly detailed environment for the audience to be in. And as always with Jodorowsky, he makes full use of his artist's capabilities. This story starts with this Christ character on a cross dying, and he's like kind of challenging people to, come on, this is between me and him. Nobody else will make sacrifices. So there's some kind of like challenging attitude going on here in the beginning. Then we jump back to the birth of Wanito, who is the son of the gun, the titular son of the gun. And you can see here that Wanito is born with a tail, which makes him, a strange figure to those around him. He gets discarded and then found by this like dwarf transvestite hooker named Half Pint. And Half Pint takes him away and feeds him with the dog milk. And then here even like puts the gun in his mouth as a pacifier to get him to shut up. So that's where the son of the gun comes from, is he's literally like raised by dogs, raised to be a violent person, raised by suckling the gun. And that seems to be like a pretty typical Jodorowsky type of story arc going on in here, where you have some very awful, violent person trying to find some kind of redemption, basically. Like, that's a pretty typical arc for Jodorowsky, is the redemption arc. You can see George Bess really killing it with the sense of place and atmosphere, especially in a drawing like this, where he's got that wet street down so well, and the sense of like hot, wet lighting. As is pretty typical of Jodorowsky, like you have to delve into the most awful parts of humanity to get the redemption. He doesn't seem to be that interested in people just living good lives from the beginning. So here you have the Wanito character is an absolutely just reprehensible character. Him and his friends are going around grabbing women off the street and just like raping them in the back of their car and pouring beer on their face. Me and Tori talk about it a lot, but because she watched Jodorowsky's Dune with me and has read a couple of his books since, and we talk about like him and Alan Moore and what it is about, especially mystically inclined authors of this era, coming out of the 60s and the 70s, why they seem to hold rape as like a sacred act. Like Jodorowsky straight up says that in the Jodorowsky's Dune. He tends to think of it as sacred, and Alan Moore has that kind of suggestion in some of his work as well, which is very uncomfortable, but it's showing up again as kind of like the beginning of the journey. You have to, I guess, you have to break all the rules before you can be fully human, I think is the thought. You have this character now, Wanito, who's really just a roughneck. He starts to be able to, and just roaming around with his friends, being an awful person. He starts to work his way up in the underground, the criminal world here, where he saves the prime minister's doctor. And in saving the prime minister's doctor, the person that's going to get him connected, he kills his three friends. So he's this completely cold-blooded person as well. He saw a chance for himself to like move forward in the world by saving this person and took it at the expense of his friends' lives. So that gives you a sense of the absolute just wretch of a human we're dealing with here. Because of that act, he's introduced to the mafia, and they have him go kill this woman. And that's how he gets initiated into his mob name, Juan Solo. Then you see they put him through this gauntlet test where they beat him and they make him fight everybody. So now he's initiated into the mob and has gone from being Wanito to Juan Solo. You could see just an absolute like fighter, a miserable person, a total drunk, but a real badass as well. As he ingratiates himself further into the general, the evil political person who's running the country, into his mafia, he then gets sent to take care of the general's ex. This is La Tigresa. She's to be assassinated. So Juanito has been sent out to assassinate the ex. The ex is someone who is now like whipping up populist rebellion against the general and the drug dealers. So that's what's going on here. And you can see this is probably some of the best art in the book on this spread as well. There's really, really detailed scenes that go back like forever, ever here into the mountains. Crowd scenes just totally filled up with really unique, believable people. Beautiful image here, lovely coloring all throughout. So that sense of place is really, really important in Bess's art in this book. We get some more typical Jodorowsky rape stuff in here, where this awful general person has been raping his own daughter for 10 years. And then he says here, everyone has their cross to bear. You wanted me like a bitch in heat. That night you left the door to your room wide open and lay spread on your bed naked. I was 15, you were over 40. So not only rape, but like incestuous rape, which is another theme that shows up over and over for Jodorowsky. I don't know what that's about, but it's off-putting. And another kind of off-putting little sequence here where this character pulls a blade out of his ass. He has a blade keistered, and then he says, see, Juan, being gay has its advantages, like only gay guys could keister something. I don't know. There's some of the machismo of like that era of creators comes through in the Jodorowsky stuff really strong. As much as I love his work, there are definitely aspects of it that are off-putting to me. And then because he has moved up so high in the organization and is such a trustworthy member of the general's mafia, he's sent to look over the general's wife and the general's son. So this is Laura and Lucho. And it turns out, spoiler alert, that of course, because we have to get into more incestuous accidental sex, that Laura here turns out to be Juan Solo's mother, and they don't find that out until after they've fucked. And you can see that their fucking gets a little strange and kinky because she's into his tail, wants to lick the tail there. And then that comes out here where the general says, yes, Juan Solo, you slept with your mother, murdered your sister, killed the old man who first saved your life. I wish you and that whore all the happiness you deserve. So a real kind of like Oedipus story here, very Greek in that he goes through and accidentally fucks his mom, accidentally kills his sister. Just the real lowest of the low, like in terms of a life story, I think is what Jodorowsky's trying to show here. After getting kicked out of the general's life, going on the run with his mother, who he also had sex with previously, they wind up now with her being a prostitute, and Juan's just kind of a drunk, like, hangabout that's really not accomplishing anything. She'll have him in the room, like, wiggling his tail for the guys. They just really go to the bottom of the barrel there. So Juan goes further on the run from all these people that are looking for him that the general has sent out, takes off out into the desert. He has to like kill this animal here and drink the blood of he finds the dead donkey and is trying to crack it open here and drinking its blood. Something about the artwork here reminds me of Nick Dragotta. I wonder if he's influenced by George Bess at all. Maybe it's just the color schemes or something, but it reminds me of his work on East and West. So at this point in his wanderings, this utterly depraved person at the bottom walks into this church and is just trying to steal some clothes, I think. And this villager sees him and sees his tail and is like, oh my God, you're like the chosen one, the prophet one. So he becomes the saint of this village. You can see him here in his very Rasputin-like hat. It's got this Selene moon shape on it and then two different crosses. Feels very like Russian Orthodoxy, but this is somewhere in South America that this is set. And he becomes like their savior. he becomes the Christ. And that's, now we're wrapping back to the beginning where we're seeing that Christ figure on the cross being like challenging to somebody. Really love this image here. Very kind of Moebius-esque in terms of its handling of the desert. It seems pretty obvious to me that George Bess is influenced by Moebius, but some really beautiful, like blueberry level type of drawing of the desert there. And that's pretty much the story. Like we wrap back around here to where now he's been caught, and he's been like kind of this redeemed figure, and he saves the village and, you know, sacrifices himself. So he has like this redemption arc going on in the story, which I believe is what Jodorowsky is intending to show in the book. But I feel like with Jodorowsky, the redemption always comes very quickly at the end, and I don't get the like how-to part of it. Jodorowsky seems much more interested in reveling in the kind of, at least in this story, and I'm thinking of like the Meta Barons and stuff like that, where there's a lot of this incest and accidentally sleeping with your mother. He seems more interested in that, and always the culmination of the story comes a little quick at the end. But still completely enjoyable. The artwork all the way throughout, like, obviously is awesome, and very excited to keep reading forward in the Jodorowsky library. And you can see that these come with some little afterwords and stuff as well, so an extra feature of the book. The next thing that we will be looking at is the story Pietrolino, which is about a muse.